Hey folks, tonight we're diving into the wildlife of a female warrior. Not a queen, not some legend, but a Viking Shieldmaiden. Fierce, brutal, and terrifying enemies all across the North Sea. She's the very picture of Norse grit and feminine power. So before you get comfy, take a sec to like the video and subscribe only if you actually like what I'm doing here. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Always cool to see folks tuning in from all over the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soothing noise, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You're born smack in the middle of a freezing winter, obviously. The fire barely flickers. The midwife's probably drunk on mead. And the longhouse smells like smoke, wet fur, and boiled cabbage. Your mom's lying on a heap of unwashed wool blankets from last harvest, clutching a wooden spoon like it's a weapon, and honestly, sometimes it really is. You don't cry. You scream. The midwife jumps. Your dad, who claims he survived 3 raids and a troll attack, or at least that's his story, looks at you and mutters, "This girl's gonna cause trouble." The rest of the village nods like it's a medical diagnosis. You're a girl, which means life's already a gamble. You'll either die young, get married, or, if you're lucky and scary enough, skip all that and earn a title most girls only hear about in fairy tales' Shield Maiden. Your cradle is a reused goat trough. You share it with a scrap of wool, a carved owl, and maybe a spider named Hilda, who flat out refuses to move out. No lullabies here, just loud snoring men and someone sharpening axes in the corner. Every few minutes, a dog trots by and licks your forehead. Think of it as the Viking baby monitor. Your family's got 2 war-scarred older brothers, a grandma who chats with ghosts, and an aunt who's been married 3 times. All her husbands mysteriously died during training accidents. You're the 4th girl born this year, and the only one who didn't scream at birth. You came out pissed off. Your name was picked based on 2 things: how loud you were, and which ancestor hadn't had a kid named after them in a while. Eventually, you get something like Freias or Brynhild, meaning may the gods have mercy on anyone who messes with her. You survived your first night, which many can't claim. Fire keeps you warm. Fresh milk. Lice show up fast. By the weekend, the whole village calls you the noisy one. Someone carves you a wooden dagger for teething. You don't chew it. You practice holding it. You're 2 years old, teething and wild. The world's your battlefield. Your first weapon, sheep bones. Viking childhood is no picnic. No stuffed animals. No pacifiers. No safety rails. What you get is what's missing from the stew. Your favorite toy is a carved wooden horse, missing a leg and bearing bite marks from 3 cousins. You also have a pig's bladder ball and a stick, interchangeable as a magic wand, sword, or a disciplinary tool for anything smaller than you. Your playground is the muddy yard outside the longhouse, shared with livestock and future injuries. No such thing as childproof. Everything's sharp, flammable, or edible, sometimes all 3. You once swallowed a fish hook. The village cheered when it came back up. Simple and brutal games. Catch the chicken by the scratch. Who can throw a stone far enough to bruise raiding the neighbor's woodpile causes social drama. Your favorite game, ambushing your cousins, which ends when someone cries and an elder yells, "By Thor's beard, not again." You learn social rules fast. Share food, but only after you've licked it. Never touch someone else's comb. Always give the first bite to the chief's dog, or it'll claim it. Someone cried and an old-timer yelled, "By Thor's beard, not again." You pick up social rules pretty fast. Share your food, but only after you've licked it first. Never touch someone else's comb, and always give the first bite to the chief's dog, or else it'll snatch it away. Formal schooling. Nah, you learn from what you see. You watch your mom grinding grain and patching clothes. You see your dad cleaning weapons and arguing about fish taxes. You watch your siblings bashing each other with sticks, trying to impress by lifting goats. You try it too. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. By 4 years old, you can make fire, skin a rabbit, and tell when adults are full of it. You've mastered sneaking off to steal honey cakes. You get caught a lot. That's character building. Some kids are quiet and well-behaved. You nope. Your hair's dusty. Your shirt's bloody. And pride is practically bursting out of your tiny chest. Your grandma pats your head and says, "That kid looks like she'll make men quake in their boots." You don't get it yet, but you like how it sounds. You're 5 and have already learned 2 big things. Fire means life. Everything else is just noise and cold. Your schooling starts early, not in a classroom, but in the brutal, cold reality of rural life. Forget chalkboards and reading circles. Lesson 1, don't fall into the fjord. Lesson 2, if it's steaming, don't touch it. You fail both. School, what school? Instead, your education follows the classic Nordic syllabus watch. Repeat. And get yelled at by exhausted adults wielding sharp tools. Math is counting sheep and spoons. Fail either, and you get a hands-on lesson in consequences. Reading, you're shown runes carved into stone and told they mean death. You nod and remember. Your vocabulary grows fast. Half the words mean hit, bleed, or run for your life. Your mom teaches you how to grind grain without losing fingers. Your dad shows you how to hold a sword without looking like you're about to cry. Your uncle teaches you how to gut fish. Your aunt, she teaches you how to gut a man. Theoretically, no one uses baby talk. Adults speak normally, even if you don't understand half of it. Learn fast or fall behind physically and socially. There are songs, but they mostly tell stories of bloody battles or glorious deaths in war. You hum them while doing chores. Your lullaby is about a warrior having his ribs pulled out. Weird, but oddly soothing. By 6, you know how to sharpen blades, tie knots, and recognize when the goats start acting like a storm's coming. You've also mastered confident lying, sneaking extra berries, and throwing stones with sniper-level accuracy. Nobody's raising you gently. You're being forged like a sword in fire by folks who haven't smiled since the winter solstice. But there's pride. When you do something right, no one claps. They just grumble, nod, and make you do it again. This time with less supervision. You're not a kid in the modern sense, just a tiny adult with fewer responsibilities and a bit more edge. Puberty hits like a bad omen, sudden, inconvenient, and zero care for your feelings. One morning you wake up a bit taller, smell a bit worse, and filled with unexplained rage. Your voice sounds the same, but your insults pack a punch. Your face oils up more than a lantern, and your sweat could knock out a wild boar from 20 paces. Welcome to Viking adolescence. Now you start bleeding monthly. Nobody hands you a pamphlet or gives a talk. Your mom just hands you some wool and says, "Figure it out." You do, because what choice do you have? And she's already back to skinning rabbits. Your body's changing. But the chores don't stop. You still carry water, chop wood, clean fish, and wrestle with goats who hate you personally. Now you do it because of a sore back and a mysterious urge to stab something. Everyone insists this is normal. Your training steps up. You're not fighting with wooden sticks anymore. You use real blades. Though at first, they're dull, not because they want you safe, but because they're not ready to replace you yet. You're encouraged to hit harder, move faster, and never cry unless it's for blood loss or joy. You're expected to fight on par with the boys, and when you beat them, you're told not to brag. A scrap of wool and someone says, "Go on," you do it because, well, what else can you do? And she's already back to skinning rabbits. Your body's changing, but the chores, not a chance. You still haul water, chop wood, clean fish, and wrestle with goats that personally hate you. Now you do it because your back hurts and you have some mysterious urge to stab something. Everyone says it's normal. Your training gets ramped up. No more wooden stick sword fights. You use real blades, but dull ones at first. Not because they don't want you hurt, but because they're not ready to replace you yet. You're encouraged to hit harder, move faster, and never cry unless you're bleeding or super happy. You're expected to fight as well as the boys, and when you beat them, you're told not to brag. Of course, you brag anyway, quietly, with the goats, socially. Things get weirder. Some girls start braiding their hair carefully and flirting with the boys. You braid your hair so it won't get in your eyes during drills. When boys flirt with you, you ask if they want to spar. Most back off slowly. A few try once. Fewer try twice. Your evenings are spent cleaning weapons, eating stew, and trying not to think too hard about the future. You don't dream about weddings or silk dresses. You dream of eating stew and desperately trying not to think about the future. No dreams of weddings or fancy silk robes here. You dream of standing in the shield wall, shoulder to shoulder with warriors who don't ask if you're strong enough. You haven't earned your spot yet, but you're close. And when you see your reflection in the blacksmith's shield, fierce eyes, wild hair, bruised arms, you're no longer a girl. You're a threat. You're 12, which in Viking years means you're basically an adult, ready to mess up your life with steel. On your birthday, your dad gives you a gift. It's long, wrapped in cloth, heavy and cold. You unwrap it carefully, expecting maybe a broom or a stale loaf of bread. Nope. It's an axe iron blade, leather handle, sharp enough to chop wood, bones up, or your ego. You name it right away. Not because you're sentimental, but because pretending it's a friend makes it a little less scary. You pick a fittingly intimidating name, like wolf bite or glove. You head outside to try it out. Your first swing misses completely and nearly wrecks the fence. The second one hits your foot. You don't cry. You just sit there silently bleeding, wondering if this counts as a rite of passage or just a terrible idea with a sharp edge. Your uncle bandages your toe and says, "That's how you learn." Then he laughs and hands you a pig's ear. You respectfully decline. The next few weeks are trial and error. Mostly error. You practice on logs, straw dolls, and sometimes the training post, which is now a bit crooked thanks to your wild swings. Your form improves, confidence grows, but your foot still aches. You learn to oil the handle, sharpen the blade, and swing without bending your back like a drunk grandpa trying to dance. You train until your hands blister, then train some more until those blisters turn into calluses. Sometimes you train alone, sometimes with your cousin, who's 2 years older and insists on twirling before each strike like he's performing for gods who definitely aren't watching. One day, you block a blow, counterattack, and land a perfect hit on your opponent's ribs. They drop their weapon and see stars. You don't gloat much. That night, you set the axe beside your bed, not for decoration or tradition, but just in case someone breaks in and gets the wrong idea. You're not just learning to fight. You're learning you were made for it, like most terrible ideas. It started with someone opening their mouth. You're training, axe in hand, minding your own business. When a taller, cockier boy who just won a sparring match looks at you and says, "You sure you want to fight, don't want to break a nail?" You don't reply, not with words. Instead, you step into the ring, nod to the coach, and get ready. The boy smirks, half turns to his cheering friends, one of whom whispers, "Go easy on her." You're not going easy. Your first strike is blocked. The second grazes his shoulder. The third hits him square in the chest, knocking the wind out of him with a noise like a dying goose. He recovers fast, swings out, but misses. You drop low, sweep his legs, and slam him into the mud like you've dreamed of this moment your whole life. He tries to get up. You stomp on his chest. Silence. The guys stop cheering. The coach clears his throat. The goats watching from the edge of the field look mildly impressed. You step down, flick your braid back like a battle flag, and walk off without a word. Someone looking at you and saying, "You sure you want to fight?" You don't want to break a nail. You don't answer, not with words. Instead, you step into the arena, nod to the trainer, and get ready. The boy smirks. He turns halfway toward his cheering friends, one whispering something like, "Go easy on her." You're not going easy. Your first strike is blocked. The second just brushes his shoulder. The third hits him right in the chest, knocking the wind out of him with a sound like a dying goose. He recovers fast, swings wildly but misses. You go low, sweep his legs, and slam him into the mud like you've dreamed about this moment your whole life. He tries to get up. You stomp on his chest. Silence. The boys stop cheering. The trainer clears his throat. The goats watching from the edge of the field look kinda impressed. You step down, flick your braid back like a battle flag, and walk off without a word. The boy coughs, mutters something, That sounds sensible, then limps off to tend his wounds, especially his pride. Then one of the elders pulls you aside. You brace for a scolding. Instead, they grumble and say, "Nice leg." Your mom nods approvingly. Your dad just raises an eyebrow, then invites you to dinner with a bigger portion of dried fish. In Viking culture, that's basically a standing ovation. The boy doesn't look at you for a week. When he finally does, it's with the cautious respect reserved for a bear you accidentally poked once. Dinner comes with a giant dried fish. In Viking culture, that's basically a standing ovation. The kid won't look at you for a whole week. When he finally does, it's with the cautious respect you'd give a bear you accidentally poked with a stick. You learn something important that day. You don't have to speak up to be heard. You don't have to laugh to be liked. And you definitely don't have to apologize when other people's bad judgment backfires on them. Victory smells like sweat, dirt, and slightly overcooked stew, and you'll never forget that. No fancy rituals, glowing runes, prophecies, or lightning ripping the sky. Just a cracked shield, a split lip, and the grunts of an old warrior. She's ready. You've spent years fighting, sweating, and collecting bruises like badges of honor. Your mornings start with training. Your nights end with pain in muscles you didn't even know existed. Now you can diagnose injuries just by feeling the pain. Sprains, sharp aches, bruises, stabbing pains, and a bruised ego, still nursing a black eye from losing to your grandma in wrestling last week. Your braid's longer now, not for style, but for practicality. You tie it up before fighting so it doesn't get caught in your helmet or ripped out by some clumsy opponent. Some girls bead. You weave in bits of skin and teeth. Not yours? Probably. Training's changed. The question isn't whether you can swing an axe, but whether you can keep your head when someone's trying to chop it off. Now you fight men. No one's going easy on you, and you don't expect it. You've learned hesitation costs more than pain. It costs respect. Your shield arm's stronger than your sword arm. Your fingers get tangled in skin or scales. You can't win every fight, but you never stop fighting. That's what makes them trust you. Then one day, during training, your shield cracks. A perfect hit from a guy twice your size. It splits in half, shards flying. You toss it aside and keep going bare hands, bloody, pissed off enough to make it interesting. You lose the fight, but no one forgets what you did. That's the day the elders start using your name differently. Not like a kid who needs fixing, but like a warrior you can count on. No one says you're just a shield maiden anymore, but they don't side-eye you when you take your place in the shield wall. Braids, blood, bruises all well earned. You're not just a shield maiden now. You're the one people watch when things go south, wondering what you'll do next. Finally, you get on a longship, and within the first hour, you deeply regret every life choice that brought you here. The deck's slick, the wind's brutal, and the rowing bench is basically a wooden torture device for your spine. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with warriors who smell like old leather, dried sweat, and optimism that died 3 days ago. No privacy. You shift a bit and your knee bumps someone's axe. Shift again and someone sneezes in your hair. A seagull cries overhead like it's mocking your life choices. Rowing isn't a sport. It's a full body punishment disguised as transportation. By mid morning, your hands blister. By noon, those blisters are swelling. Your palms feel like someone's grating them with a cheese grater. They tell you that means you're doing it right. No relief, just rowing. Your arms ache, your legs go numb, and your seat is so damp it raises existential questions. Every stroke brings you closer to glory and probably tendinitis. Meals on board are bleak. Dried fish taste like helmet lining. Bread's so hard you could use it as a weapon. And the water is technically stagnant if you're feeling generous. Helmets, rock-hard bread you could use as a weapon. And water that's basically just stagnant if you're lucky. You chew slowly, pondering rebellion. At night, you curl up along the ship's side, using your shield as a blanket and your axe as a pillow. You're gently rocked by the waves, the crew's snores, and a nagging suspicion that this whole trip was planned by someone who hates fun. But despite the pain, the cold, the constant dampness, there's something else. The thrill of setting sail, the crew's camaraderie, the quiet pride. You earned your spot. You're not a tag-along. You're not the mascot. You're a warrior, and warriors row. When the coastline finally shows up on the horizon, just a dark, strange line, your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and your heart's pounding with anticipation. You're wiped out, hungry, a little seasick, and totally ready. Because the boat isn't just transport, it's a forge. And when you land, you get forged. The coastline looks like a secret nobody wants to share. A quiet village, thatched roofs, smoke lazily drifting from chimneys, some chickens, maybe a baker, and hell, maybe even a hopeful little goat. You're about to wreck it all. When your longship hits shore, your stomach twists, not guilt, but a very real, physical panic. Here it is, your first raid, real steel, real enemies, real consequences if you trip in the mud and accidentally stab yourself before anyone else gets a chance. You jump off the ship. The beach is surprisingly soft, not great. You almost roll your ankle before reaching the village. Battle cries echo all around you, loud, primal, and mostly improvised. Your cough sounds like a goat's bleat. No worries. You're the newbie. You're paying your dues. Your first opponent isn't a warrior. It's a chicken. It charges at you aggressively, flapping like it's got something to prove. You dodge to the side and wave at a guy holding a pitchfork. He drops it and runs off. You chase him for a bit, then remember you're supposed to be looting. You break into a hut and find cheese. Lots of cheese. You take some. Feels like a win. Outside, chaos, screaming, fires. Someone trips over a bucket. Another starts singing for no reason. A warrior next to you shouts at Odin and falls into a well. You're starting to get why Viking raids are terrifying and utterly baffling. Eventually, the resistance fades. The village is pacified, a fancy way of saying it's been burned and looted. Your crew grabs whatever's useful: silver, tools, livestock, a very nice chair. You drag yourself back to the ship with bruised shins, a stolen spoon, and half a wheel of cheese. Not quite the heroic slow-mo montage you imagined. No grand speeches, just adrenaline noise, and the vague feeling you might have been yelling for 20 straight minutes. But you're still alive. You held your ground, didn't drop your weapon, and even though your shirt smells like wild goat and your ears are still ringing, you feel it. The older warriors chat quietly by the fire. That rush, that certainty, that strength. You didn't just survive your first raid. You took part in it, and next time you'll do better. The battle's over. The village behind you smokes, looted, and probably still confused about what just happened. You head back to the longship, collapse, smelling like someone roasted anxiety over a fire made of soggy regrets. Your shirt's torn, your shoes are muddy. There's a cut on your shoulder you didn't notice until someone pointed it out. They grin and say the scar's gonna look cool, like that's medical advice. Your hands are blistered, your thighs cramped, and you're pretty sure there's still a chicken feather stuck in your braid. Not sure if that's from fighting or lunch, maybe both. The stern is quieter now. No shouting, just groans, chewing, and the occasional sarcastic retelling of who tripped over what. Someone claims they single-handedly took down 5 armed villagers. You saw him drop his sword in a puddle and cry. Nobody corrects him. He needs this. Food passes around dried fish, hard bread, and most sacred of all, a jug of beer. Some claim he single-handedly took down 5 armed villagers. You saw him drop his sword into a puddle and cry. No one corrected him. He needed this. Food was passed around dried fish, hard bread, and the most sacred of all, a bottle of beer. The weather was warm. It was bitter. It tasted like victory mixed with mold. Still, you drank it. You hoped the wind would echo louder, but actually, it felt more like bruises and a deep satisfaction lodged somewhere between your ribs and spine. You did it. You crossed the sea, held on tight, and came back. With cheese and a story, by nightfall, you'd be back at camp. The fire crackled, the meat sizzled. Someone had, already asleep, snoring right into their helmet. You sit cross-legged with your fellow warriors, staring at the flames like you're waiting for the gods to drop some wisdom. Spoiler, no gods show up, but someone hands you a roasted turnip, which is almost the same thing. Now there's laughter, the kind that's sad and tired like people who just survived something dumb together. You laugh too, that's not because it's funny, but because it happened. You were there, and you didn't die. When you're ready to crash, curled up with your shield and your dented helmet, you know this is the first raid of many, the first headache of many. But tonight, you rest. You've earned it. The raid season ends when the cold hits, and so does your brief moment of glory. You go home, expecting rest, maybe even praise. Instead, you get winter, the brutal, soul-crushing Viking winter. The fjord ice melts. The longship gets dragged ashore and flipped like a retired dragon. You put away your armor, knowing your survival mode is just that, barely surviving. Chores double. Daylight disappears. Your motivation follows suit. You chop wood until your fingers go numb. You haul frozen buckets from an icy stream that stares at you like it wants you dead. The goats, who mentally hate you, now lean on you for warmth and hay. You don't like them, but you respect their stubbornness. They repay you by screaming at 3 a. Food gets worse, fast. Fresh meat becomes a distant memory. Now you're eating smoked fish, dried fish, and fish soaked in something that might be vinegar cleaner to mix it up. You try mashed turnips. Spoiler no help. You eat in silence, packing up whatever you have. You smell like wool, damp fur, and regret. Your hair hasn't fully dried in weeks. Your toes feel like strangers. Your shield's covered in dust. Still, you polish it, mostly to remember what happiness looked like. Your family sticks around. Too much. The crowded longhouse, filled with smoke and endless arguments about who moved the wood and why. The stew smells like socks. You train outside in the snow just to escape, even if your fingers freeze gripping your sword's hilt. But then, something changes. You get stronger. You become colder, both inside and out. You start appreciating silence. You stop caring about the smell of everything pickled. You endure. One morning, the snow begins to melt. You hear the first bird song in months, a tiny, sharp sound like hope and maybe a migraine. You walk to the fjord. The ice is cracking. Spring is coming. Raid season will return, and when it does, you'll be ready, angry, starving, and ready to act. Winter tried but failed. You survived the winter. By the skin of your teeth, your reward, a marriage proposal. They start pretty innocent. The son of a local farmer shows up with a bundle of dried fish and an optimistic smile. He says you'll be a strong wife. You reply by asking how good he is at swinging an axe. He says he doesn't use weapons. You tell him you don't like men who can't hold a knife. He leaves fast. The next guy tries harder. He brings you a gift, an intricately carved comb made from deer antler. You politely accept it, then use it to scratch behind your dog's ear. He never comes back. Soon, it'll be a trend. Young dudes bring gifts and nervous energy, hoping to tame the village's fiercest Shieldmaiden. The problem, you don't want taming. You want to raid, spar, and sometimes party without anyone bringing up goats. Your aunt says you should consider settling down. You tell her you'll settle down when your axe rusts. She mumbles something about dying alone. You fire back. Dying gloriously sounds way better. Honestly, one particularly bold suitor challenges you. He says, "That's tradition." You agree. He's got bruises shaped like your shield and learned a valuable lesson about underestimating women training on snow just for fun. Eventually, the calls to quit came. News spread. You don't care. It's not about being someone's wife, not about cooking stew every night, and definitely not about arguing over who gets the nice fur blanket. You want more and less at the same time. More battles, less chit-chat, more glory, fewer goats. 2. Be clear. You're not against love. You just haven't met anyone who makes your heart pound louder than war drums. And until that happens, you might as well keep sharpening your axe. Some village girls whisper you're too proud. Some boys whisper they're scared of you. Both are right. You spend your evenings on the training field instead of weaving cloth. You polish your blade instead of planning a wedding. and you sleep with your axe nearby, not because you're lonely, but because it's the only companion that never talks back. You've fought raids, skirmishes, petty clan disputes over goats and insults. But this is war. It all begins before dawn, with silence so thick it feels like the earth is holding its breath. The enemy isn't some scared peasant village. These are armed warriors, armored up, sharpening their swords in your honor. No rousing speeches, just your leader mumbling, "Don't die, stupid." Then tying his boots, you nod. Sounds about right. You stand in the shield wall, shoulder to shoulder, with friends you fought beside and occasionally insulted by the fire. Today your shield feels heavier, so does your breath. Someone nearby is puking, another is singing, and then it begins. The first clash is chaos. Shields slam, swords scream, people die, probably more than one. You block, swing, duck, stab, repeat. This isn't strategy, it's survival at panic speed. Your shield cracks. You switch to your axe. Your axe breaks. You grab a spear dropped by, a man who no longer needs it. You lose track of time. Forget what language you're yelling in. You just know your legs hurt and your hands won't stop moving. Eventually, you'll fall. Nothing fancy, just a stumble. You drop into mud next to a corpse that looks suspiciously like someone you once knew. You can't hear anything but the thump-thump of your heart and distant battle roars. A shadow looms. You roll. A sword misses by a hair. You grab a rock. You use it. Somehow, it works. When it's really over, the battlefield is quiet again, except now the earth doesn't hold its breath anymore. The dead won't breathe again. You sit there, covered in blood that's not your own, trying to recall fear, pride, or even hunger. A bird lands nearby, instantly regrets it. You survived. You shouldn't have, but you did. And when someone asks how, you just shrug and say, "Wasn't anything better to do." True enough. But that's not the whole story. After the battle, things change. You're still you. Same boots, same axe, same mysterious stain on your cloak that won't go away. But now people look at you differently, not just like a warrior, but like a legend. Some start calling you the man who won't die. Another nickname is Goat Hammer, which sounds awful but stuck thanks to an unfortunate incident involving a fleeing enemy and a nearby goat. You don't bother correcting them. Let them talk. The truth is messier and less fun. Now, when you walk through the village, people move aside, not far. Just step aside, like they're not sure if you're asking for help or issuing a challenge. You nod politely. They nod cautiously back. Kids whisper your name and dare each other to poke your shield. Responded very cautiously. Kids whispered your name and dared each other to poke your shield. When you weren't looking, they never succeeded. Once, you caught a boy sneaking around and handed him your axe. He froze. You said nothing. He gave it back and ran off. You never saw him again. Smart kid. Nowadays, warriors ask for your advice before a raid, not just out of politeness, but because you've been there, done that, and came back with more scars than excuses. You're no longer that loud, tough girl. You're a veteran, a problem solver, a cautionary tale with a calls you the mistress of the sword. You correct him by spitting in a bucket and asking if he brought better cheese this time. He nods so fast you'd think he'd pass out. At night, around the campfire, you hear your own story retold. It's a bit off, wildly exaggerated, with new additions like lightning, a glowing raven, and a crazy kiss. You say nothing. That's funnier. You don't want the fame. You definitely don't laugh at it. But now it's here. You carry it like a shield, well used, a bit dented, but always ready. You once wondered if people respected you. Now you wonder if they stopped trembling long enough to actually talk. You're not the youngest anymore. There's a bunch of big-eyed girls with tight braids, loose axes, and loud mouths talking about what they'll do in battle. You see yourself in them, but less sore and more optimistic. They watch you closely, not like a hero, more like a storm that could hit any time. You deserve that. Your joints ache in the morning. Your sword wrist clicks when it gets cold. You have a scar on your ribs that itches whenever snow's coming. Your wounds don't heal like they used to, and when they do, the pain sticks around like that drunk buddy who never knows when to leave. But you're not weak. You're just tougher in the right spots. You train less to prove something and more to stay sharp. You eat slower, sleep less, speak only when there's something worth saying, which means half the longhouse still hasn't heard your voice. When young maidens ask how to win their first fight, you say, "Don't die." When they ask how to get respect, you say, "Break their nose, then help them up." And when they ask when it stops being scary, you tell the truth, it doesn't. You just get better at faking it. You still raid, just not as often now. When you show up, people check if you actually came. If you do, they sigh with relief. If not, they check your armor twice. Your axe has worn down, the handle wrapped in fresh leather, the blade nicked but still sharp. More people have seen it than most warriors. Has outlived everyone who ever chased you. You thought about hanging it up, but then someone says something dumb or a threat appears on the horizon, and you remember you're not done yet. You never wanted to be a legend. You just wanted to fight, survive, and claim your spot in a world you thought you didn't belong in. And somehow, through blood, fire, and stubborn refusal to quit, you did. You're not just a shield maiden. You're a warning, and next time someone asks if you still fight, you'll smile, just a little, and say, "Only when necessary," and sometimes just for fun, long before hospitals and white coats. The Greeks believed the best cure was a nap inside a temple, not lazy healing, but something they called incubation, and it was sacred in ancient Greece. If you were sick, no need to see a doctor. You packed your bags and made a pilgrimage to Asclepius's temple, the god of healing, usually in Epidaurus, where marble columns smelled faintly of laurel and offerings. Once there, you performed purification rituals, bathed in holy water, offered a small sacrifice, often a rooster, and prepared to sleep in the Abaton, a dark, quiet room where patients lay on mats, sometimes with snakes crawling freely around them. Yes, snakes, sacred to Asclepius, symbolizing renewal and rebirth. The idea was simple but mystical: fall asleep in the god's presence, and he'd visit you in your dreams. Temple. This isn't some lazy healing hack. It's called incubation, and it's sacred in ancient Greece. If you got sick, you didn't need a doctor. You packed your bags and made a pilgrimage to the temple of Asclepius, the healing god, usually at Epidaurus, where marble columns faintly smelled of bay leaves and offerings. Once there, you'd perform a purification ritual, bathe in holy water, offer a small sacrifice, usually a rooster, and prepare to sleep in the Abaton, a dark, quiet room where patients lay on mats, sometimes with snakes slithering freely around them. Yes, snakes. They were sacred to Asclepius and symbolized renewal and rebirth. The idea was simple but mystical: fall asleep in the god's presence, and he'd visit you in your dreams. These sacred dreams weren't just symbolic, they were the prescription. You might see Asclepius touching your wounded leg or handing you a healing herb. In the morning, you'd report your vision to a temple priest, who'd interpret it like a spiritual pharmacist and advise you on what to do next. This wasn't passive at all. The journey to the temple, the purification, the prayers all prepped your mind and body to heal. Some scholars think this was an early form of psychotherapy. Others call it theatrical placebo. But whatever it was, it usually worked, or at least people believed it did. Sometimes patients left cured, others felt inspired, but most left stories behind, and the temples proudly displayed these stories carved in stone, testimonies of restored sight, healed limbs, and divine intervention. Not clinical trials, but persuasive testimonials, etched in marble. This ritual blurred the lines between medicine and religion, between dreams and diagnosis. The goal wasn't to fight symptoms, but to harmonize with a sacred balance. Healing wasn't just about the body. It was a conversation with the universe, and if you were lucky, the universe would answer gently around midnight in the form of a god, a whisper, and a snake curled at your feet. Now, let's leave peaceful Greek bedrooms and head east to ancient Mesopotamia. Here, healing was more like an exorcism than a nap. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, illness wasn't just a biological problem, it was personal. People believed sickness was caused by evil spirits sent by angry gods, jealous neighbors, or vengeful ghosts, and the cure trapped the demon in a bowl. These magic bowls, also called Babylonian demon bowls, were like ancient Mesopotamian spiritual bug zappers. They were simple pottery pieces, turned upside down and buried under house thresholds. But their purpose wasn't decoration. Each bowl was inscribed inside in a spiral with Aramaic or other local languages, filled with protective spells and sacred names. The text was concise, purposeful, and somewhat frantic, calling on angels, saints, and cosmic forces designed to trap any nasty evil lurking around. The demon doesn't just leave the body. Nope. It's meant to be stuck in the bowl forever, like some ancient spiritual Tupperware. Some bowls even feature crude drawings of chained up sinful souls, which honestly look pretty creepy. These images are meant to shame the demon, kind of like a magical mugshot. Others went further, including family names, local complaints, and even calling out rival witches. This isn't just about healing, it's about defense. In a world full of curses, evil eyes, and whispered spells, you need spiritual insurance. These bowls were usually buried under doorways, thresholds, or house corners. Why there? Because demons, like nosy neighbors, are said to lurk at the edges, waiting to sneak in unnoticed. So the bowls acted like invisible bodyguards, blocking bad vibes and keeping the household intact. While modern medicine might scoff, there's some deep logic behind this. These rituals name, shape, and contain invisible threats, giving people a sense of control in a chaotic world. So next time something feels off and you can't explain it, check under the doormat. Who knows? There might still be a dusty bowl silently doing its job, doing its duty, blocking darkness with just ink, clay, and the ancient hope of Mesopotamia. While Mesopotamians were busy trapping demons in pottery, the ancient Egyptians went for something sexier: plants, perfumes, and potions. For them, healing wasn't just fixing bodies. It was about balance, harmony, an amazing sense. And at the heart of this fragrant medical tradition was the blue lotus, a flower with hypnotic power and spiritual clout. The blue lotus wasn't just pretty, it was intoxicating, literally soaked in wine or infused into ointments. It was used to induce mild euphoria and soothe pain, grief, or spiritual anguish. Ancient paintings show partygoers clutching blue lotuses at banquets. Priests offered them in temples, and mummies were even buried with them. People believed this flower could connect the living with the divine, opening minds to healing dreams and sacred visions. But the lotus wasn't the only tool in the Egyptian medicine cabinet. Not by a long shot. Egyptian medicine was a brilliant mix of practical experience and mysticism. They cataloged over 800 remedies in texts like the Eber's Papyrus, a 20-meter scroll packed with everything from crocodile dung suppositories to honey wound dressings. Some of these treatments were surprisingly effective, especially those using garlic, frankincense, and myrrh, all now famous for their antibacterial properties. Others leaned more spiritual than scientific. A common toothache cure was placing a cooked mouse on the sore spot. Another involved chanting spells to scare off illness, like the sickness was a naughty servant refusing orders. The line between prayer and prescription was thin, and doctors called Otsukolbayu often doubled as priests. Temples themselves functioned like hospitals. Patients were treated with a mix of amulets, incantations, and offerings to gods like Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague. If you got better, great. If not, maybe the gods were just testing your resolve. But don't get it twisted, Egyptians weren't blindly superstitious. They performed surgeries, set bones, and drained abscesses. They even took pulses and tested urine for diagnosis. In fact, Greek doctors like Hippocrates and Galen later borrowed heavily from Egyptian methods. Still, rituals stuck around because in Egypt, healing wasn't just physical, it was sacred, a way to link flesh with eternity. And sometimes, all you needed was a flower, a spell, and a little faith wrapped in linen. While Egyptians used, sometimes, all you need is a flower, a little magic chant, and some faith wrapped up in linen, while the Egyptians wrapped the sick in perfume. Way up north in Siberia and across Native America, healing got a bit more urgent, not just fixing the body, but mending the soul. See, sickness wasn't just a symptom here, it was a sign your spirit took a wrong turn, got stolen, scared off, or straight up lost, and the only one who could bring it back was the shaman. Shamans weren't doctors in the clinical sense. They were middlemen, part priest, part something else, part healer, part cosmic traveler. Their healing rituals can last hours, sometimes days, filled with drumming, chanting, fasting, and hallucinations. The goal: enter an altered state and journey into the spirit world, where they battle hostile entities, negotiate with ancestors, or haggle with natural spirits, all to retrieve the patient's missing soul fragment. These aren't metaphorical trips for the shaman and the community, they're very real. Their toolkit includes drums, said to beat like the heart of the earth, animal masks, or cloaks symbolizing guiding gods, and sometimes visionary plants to open the inner eye. A favorite among Amazonian shamans is ayahuasca, a powerful hallucinogen that cleanses and unleashes what you might call enlightening chaos. Losing your soul can come from trauma, grief, or breaking taboos. Symptoms include chronic fatigue, depression, or just plain bad luck, what today might be called psychological or emotional distress. But instead of therapy sessions, a healing ceremony might involve calling your name in the forest, dancing around a fire, or listening to the healer chant your soul back into your chest. In some traditions, the shaman will act out struggles, shake violently, mimic battles, or pull invisible threads from your body to symbolize yanking out the sickness elsewhere. They blow sacred smoke on you, press pressure points, or whisper prayers into the ear of a sleeping child. No sterile distance here. Healing is communal, emotional, and mythic. The story is about storytelling, remembering, and restoring the invisible bond between a person and the world around them. Because in these cultures, you don't just catch a cold, you get soul hurt. And if you're lucky, someone brave enough will venture into the dark to bring your soul home. Meanwhile, while shamans hunt lost souls in the spirit realm, ancient Indian sages turned inward, mapping life's rhythms into something more structured, methodical, and mysterious. Ayurveda, which means knowledge of life. This healing system focuses less on battling sickness and more on keeping harmony between body, mind, and the universe. Got digestive trouble? It's not just bad lunch, it's cosmic imbalance. According to Ayurveda, everyone's made of 3 doshas: vata, air and space, Pitta, fire and water, and Kapha, earth and water. Your unique mix doesn't just decide your health, but your temperament, personality, and favorite breakfast too. The healer's job isn't to erase symptoms, it's to rebalance your body's fats using herbs, diet, massage, meditation, and if needed, oil baths. Yeah, oil. Ayurvedic treatments love oil. People often pour warm sesame oil or medicinal butter on the forehead in a ritual called Shirodhara, aiming to soothe the nervous system and open the third eye. Other therapies include full body oil massages, detox enemas, herbal suction, and even induced vomiting called vamana, which sounds brutal but is thought to deeply cleanse. But this isn't just folk remedies. Ayurvedic texts like the Karaka Samhita, dating back at least to the first millennium BCE, lay out detailed theories of anatomy, surgical techniques, and philosophical foundations. Ancient medical practitioners were trained to diagnose illness by checking the pulse, tongue, eyes, and even the patient's voice. Yet, the spiritual side was always taken seriously. Health was seen as both a moral state and a physical one. Greed, anger, or excessive desire could spoil your meal just like spoiled yogurt. Even the patient's voice. Still, the spiritual bit was the real MVP. Health was seen as both a moral and physical state. Greed, anger, or too much desire could mess up your meal just as easily as spoiled yogurt. Meditation, chanting, breath control, pranayama. Not just spiritual fluff, these were daily meds. And, of course, herbs. Turmeric fights inflammation. Ashwagandha boosts your mojo. Neem cleanses you out. Each plant wasn't just medicine, it had personality, energy, and a backstory usually starring gods, saints, or cosmic events. Long story short, Ayurveda didn't see illness as random bad luck. It was a message, a whisper from inside saying, hey, something's out of whack. The cure. Not a battle against disease. It's realigning, harmonizing, a gentle nudge back to that sacred rhythm of life, preferably with a ton of warm oil, while India zoned in on balancing. Doshas. Ancient China cooked up its own fancy system based on the same harmony idea, energy flow, or qi pronounced qi. In traditional Chinese medicine, illness isn't just about symptoms showing up. It's about blockages or misdirection of life force. Imagine qi as an invisible river flowing through your body. When it floods, dries up, or gets stuck, things go south fast. When that blood flow is smooth and free, bam, health restored. At the core of this worldview are two guiding principles, yin and yang, complementary forces like cold and hot, dark and light, passive and active. A good healer doesn't just spot the problem. They ask, which element's overdoing it? Which one's MIA, too much fire, not enough water? Is your spleen throwing a tantrum? Doctors would check tongues, listen to voices, and take pulses not once, but at multiple points, each tied to different organs. Your liver might be pissed off, your kidneys scared stiff, The diagnoses often sound way more poetic than medical jargon. But hey, it still works. Your liver might be pissed off. Your kidneys scared stiff. The diagnoses often sound way more poetic than medical jargon. But hey, it still works. And the treatments usually acupuncture tiny needles thinner than a hairline does along energy channels to unblock pathways and boost natural flow. Sure, needles might freak you out, but oddly enough, many find it strangely relaxing, sometimes even thrilling. But traditional Chinese medicine isn't just one trick pony. They also use cupping, moxibustion, that's burning herbs near your skin, acupuncture, energy exercises, herbal remedies, and detailed diets, ginger, ginseng, licorice root, each prescribed with surgical precision. One of the most revered texts in this tradition is the Huangdi Neijing. Oh, medical philosophy dialogue written around 200 BCE, where the emperor and his docs debated not only disease but the rhythms of seasons, emotions, and even politics. A living ecosystem, part of the cosmic order. A stomachache isn't just bad dumplings. It could be a living ecosystem, part of the cosmic order. A stomachache isn't just bad dumplings. It could be unresolved pain. Healing is never just physical. It's moral, emotional, elemental, and when elements don't harmonize, the goal isn't to fight, it's to restore balance, like tuning an instrument or clearing a stream with needles and maybe a bit of burning mugwort. Across the vast and varied lands of Africa, healing has long been a community event, blending medicine, ritual, and ancestral power, unlike Western models that isolate patients in clinics. Traditional African healing involves family, ancestors, villages, and spirits in many cultures. Illness isn't just a personal issue, it's a social problem. Rupture, a cosmic imbalance that needs a full-on fix, preferably with drums, smoke, and one very nervous chicken. Take the Sangoma in South Africa, spiritual healers and shamans who act as bridges between the living and the dead. A Sangoma doesn't just diagnose symptoms. They literally read bones, a handful of bones, shells, and jewelry laid out on a mat reveal the story. It's like spiritual X-ray vision. The ancestors speak through the scatter. Once the diagnosis is in, whether it's a curse, ancestral grudges, or emotional trauma, the healing begins. Rituals might include animal sacrifices, herbal potions, or initiation dances. Music plays a big role. Drums, singing, and movement aren't just entertainment. They're tools to shift energy, call spirits for guidance, and enter trance. The goal healing, not just the body, but the soul and its invisible ties to others. Plants play a starring role too. Traditional healers, called herbalists or inyanga, have deep knowledge of local plants, roots, bark, leaves that treat infections, fevers, infertility, or pain. Some herbs get boiled into teas, others burned, rubbed on skin, or mixed into complex ritual potions. This isn't your average walk in the park. It's sophisticated medicine passed down through generations, often guarded by secrecy and spiritual initiation. Illness can also come from breaking taboos or social norms, disrespecting elders, bad-mouthing spirits, or stepping on the wrong grave. So healing isn't just medical, it's moral. You might have to confess, apologize, or go through a cleansing ritual. And yes, that could involve chicken blood, sacred ashes, or a painfully awkward family meeting. The deeper idea is crystal clear. You're not a lone wolf. You're part of a living network, ancestors, spirits, ecology. When something's off in you, it echoes through the whole web. The healer's job: listen, interpret, and stitch that web back together with herbs, chants, and ancestral wisdom watching from the firelight. In many Native American traditions, healing isn't just fixing a body part, but purifying the whole person. Sickness, physical or mental, is seen as imbalance in the person, community, spirit worlds, and nature. So one of the deepest healing rituals in many cultures is the sweat lodge, a ceremony of warmth, prayer, and spiritual rebirth. The sweat lodge is pretty simple: a dome made of willow branches covered with blankets or animal skins. Inside, it's dark and steamy. Hot stones, called the grandfathers, are placed in a central pit, and sacred herbal water is poured on them to produce steam. The air thickens with heat and memory, and participants sit in a circle, often naked or barely clothed, guided by a spiritual leader or guide. The native people, the sweat lodge, a ritual for warming up, praying, and spiritual rebirth. The sweat lodge was pretty basic, a dome-shaped structure made from willow branches covered with blankets or animal skins. Inside, it was dark and steamy. Hot stones, called grandfathers, were placed in a central pit, and sacred herbal water was poured over them to create steam. The air thickened with warmth and memories, and participants sat in a circle, usually naked or barely clothed, led by a spiritual leader or guide. This wasn't just a sauna, it was a womb. The sweat lodge symbolized Mother Earth's belly, a place to shed toxins, pain, and emotional baggage. Songs rise up, prayers are whispered, sometimes in ancient languages, almost lost to time. This ritual usually happens in rounds, each one more intense than the last, each with a different theme: gratitude, forgiveness, letting go, or honoring ancestors. The goal isn't just to sweat out illness, but to listen to yourself, to others, and to spirits. In the dark, with distractions gone, people often recount visions, emotional breakthroughs, or surprising moments of deep peace. Not always a walk in the park. The heat can get brutal, and discomfort is part of the healing package. Other healing rituals include smoke cleansing, burning sacred herbs like sage, sweetgrass, or cedar to purify the person or space, plus healing songs, passed down orally and treated like living medicine. Some cultures use sand paintings, where colorful crushed stone patterns realign spiritual forces in healing ceremonies. But at the core of it all is connection to the land, to ancestors, to natural elements. Healing is never done in isolation. It happens in relationship, through ritual. The individual is brought back into harmony with the worlds, and whether through fire, steam, or song, The goal is always the same: to restore balance, to remember who you are, and to walk again with strength on sacred ground. After wandering through Greece's dream temples, arriving at sweat lodges under starry skies, one thing becomes clear. Ancient healing was never just about the body. It was a full-on experience: physical, emotional, spiritual, and social, though the tools vary wildly from showers, demon bowls, needles, to drums. The purpose is remarkably consistent: restoring balance. In every corner of the ancient world, health wasn't defined as the absence of illness, but the presence of harmony. Harmony between body and soul, between humans and nature, between this world and the invisible one, whether through the cosmic pulse of ki, the rhythm of feet pounding earth, or the soothing trance of temple incubation. Healing rituals work because they give meaning to pain and agency to the sufferer. They recognize what modern medicine often forgets: humans are meaning-making creatures. We want to know why we hurt. We want to believe there's something we can do. Ancient healing gave people both an explanation, be it spirits, imbalance, or ancestor fury, and a way forward, often communal and therapeutic. These rituals pack a punch, even if modern medicine knocks them off as ineffective. A Mesopotamian demon bowl might not kill bacteria, but it sure can calm the mind. Calling on a shaman's spirit might not mend broken bones, but it can soothe trauma in ways words can't. Even if science is still catching up, storytelling, symbols, and ritual have real healing power. And here's the kicker: many of these ancient insights are circling back. Today's modern medicine has embraced mind-body approaches, meditation, visualization, and even plant-based therapies, psychedelic-assisted therapy. Anyone reminiscent of the shaman's journey. Hospitals now blend music, scents, and culturally sensitive rituals into care. It's like, after centuries of science hogging the spotlight, we're remembering something our ancestors just knew instinctively. Healing isn't just chemistry, it's connection. So, what do ancient healing rituals teach us, not just about herbs and hymns, but about ourselves? That we're not machines in need of fixing. We're ecosystems needing nurturing. That a whispered prayer, a steady drumbeat, or the scent of sacred smoke can sometimes reach places a scalpel never will, because deep down, healing isn't just a medical process, it's a human one. And we, back in the day, with all their mystery and chaos, they actually got it way more than most of us. Before crowns, amulets, or blinged out rings, there were shells, tiny little mollusk shells strung together and worn not just for looks, but also for meaning. Some of the oldest jewelry known to humans comes from places like Blombos Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists found shell beads over 75,000 years old. These weren't just random decorations. They were deliberately pierced, polished, and arranged. In other words, they were designed. So why on earth would early Homo sapiens waste precious time stringing shells, teeth, bones, and stones together when survival was already a full-time job? The answer seems to lie in communication. This jewelry wasn't just about looking good. It was a language. A necklace could signal your role in the group, your family line, or your dating status. Jewelry was a wearable story, a silent scream of identity. And while today we think of jewelry as luxury, the earliest forms came straight from nature's junk drawer: bird claws, animal teeth, chunks of amber, carved bones, nothing wasted, everything packed with meaning. Wearing a predator's tooth around your neck wasn't just for the aesthetic cool factor. It said, "Yeah, I survived that." Protection, bragging rights, and spirituality all rolled into one primitive pendant. Interestingly, these first beads often came from the sea, showing even inland tribes valued coastal materials. This hints at trade and exchange even among early tribes. Even back then, jewelry was a mobile culture, a way to carry identity and relationships across lands. But there was a spiritual layer too. Some anthropologists believe these items had magical or ritual purposes: shells connected to water, bones to ancestors, teeth to power. They weren't just decoration. They were talismans worn tight to ward off sickness, bad luck, or evil spirits. Basically, the birth of jewelry marked a huge leap in human awareness. It showed not just self-awareness, but awareness of how you show up to others. A shell tied to a string became more than an ornament. It became a statement of belonging, survival, and meaning. So no, ancient people weren't the cavemen we like to imagine. They were artists, caretakers, and storytellers, etching their identity into bone and passing on legacy through a hole in a shell. As human society evolved through the Paleolithic era, jewelry took on deeper symbolism, marking life and death, belonging, and heritage. During the Ice Age, jewelry wasn't just worn, it was buried, sometimes with elaborate ceremonies. The oldest graves, like those found in Sunir, Russia, dating back over 30,000 years, tell us jewelry already had deep meaning. One grave held a child, probably under 10, wrapped in a cloak, decorated with over $4,000 mammoth ivory beads. Each bead carved painstakingly from mammoth ivory, taking hours apiece. The whole process possibly thousands of hours, all for one kid. What does that tell us? Jewelry had surpassed decoration. It had become a sacred rite, a farewell, maybe even a promise to the afterlife. These Ice Age creations weren't rushed. They had symmetry, repetition, rhythm, a seriously developed aesthetic. Animal pendants, finely crafted beads, and bracelets carved from reindeer antler showed off both technical skill and spiritual symbolism. Jewelry was no longer slapped together from scraps. It was a specialized craft, with materials telling stories of place and identity. Baltic amber was found far from its source, showing long-distance trade networks. Jet, a fossilized black wood, prized for its deep shine. The other world, these Ice Age works, weren't slapped together in a hurry. They show symmetry, repetition, and rhythm, basically a killer aesthetic sense. Animal-shaped pendants, finely crafted beads, and bracelets carved from reindeer antlers show off both technical skill and spiritual symbolism. Jewelry wasn't just thrown together from scraps anymore. It became a specialized craft, With materials telling stories about place and identity, Baltic amber was found far from its origin, proving long-distance trade networks. Jet, a shiny black fossilized wood, was prized and used in jewelry even thousands of years later in some cultures. Red ochre, a blood-like pigment, was used to dye beads or funeral clothes, maybe symbolizing life force or rebirth, far from its origin. Showing a long-distance trade network, jet black stone, a type of fossilized black wood, was prized for its deep shine and was still used as jewelry even millennia later. In some cultures, red ochre, a blood-like pigment, was used to dye beads or funeral clothes, maybe as a symbol connected to life force or rebirth. Jewelry back then could also signal social status, who you were, where you belonged, and how much effort your crew was willing to put into decking you out. All that mattered, someone buried with fancy reverence was, and how much effort your squad put into decking you out. Yeah, that all mattered. Being buried with fancy bling was like getting a royal shout-out. Maybe you were a leader, a wizard, or just really, really loved. And sure, some jewelry probably doubled as love tokens, family crests, or I'm officially grown-up badges, but without written records. All this is just educated guesswork pieced together from digs and careful science. Still, what's left behind is pretty mind-blowing, even in freezing cold, danger, and survival mode. Humans found time to get creative and dress up. Jewelry was like a quiet rebellion against nature's cold shoulder. Statement that life and identity actually matter. When humans hit the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, jewelry evolved from tribal bling into tools of power and protection. Amulets, pendants, and charms weren't just about looking good anymore. They packed intention, magic, and a dash of the divine. These tiny trinkets bridged the gap between humans and the supernatural, promising protection from curses, sickness, and bad luck. Or at least that's what people believed. In ancient Egypt, jewelry as amulets reached a whole new level. Scarabs, chains, and the Eye of Horus weren't just pretty shapes. They were spiritual armor. The scarab, symbolizing rebirth and transformation, was often buried with the dead to ensure safe travels to the afterlife. Kids wore fish-shaped amulets to avoid drowning. Pharaohs got buried with golden cobra and falcon jewelry, begging the gods to guard them even in death. Material things mattered. Gold wasn't just shiny and precious. It was considered immortal, linked to the bodies of gods. Lapis lazuli, with its deep celestial blue, was said to grant divine vision. Turquoise, carnelian, and faience all packed symbolic punch. Jewelry became a way to encode cosmic ideas into wearable personal items. In Mesopotamia, similar beliefs thrived. Cylinder seals carved with protective gods were worn on the body or around the neck. Bead strings, etched with sacred symbols, were thought to ward off illness and evil spirits. Even kings were often pictured decked out in heavy jewelry bracelets, necklaces, earrings not just to flaunt wealth, but to shield their souls. The ancient Greeks also used amulets for protection, Soldiers carried gemstones engraved with gods or mythical monsters into battle, believing they'd grant strength or keep danger at bay. A popular symbol was the Gorgonean, Medusa's head, worn to petrify evil itself. These amulets weren't just for the elite. Regular folks wore them too, sometimes made of cheap metals or clay instead of gold. But the intention was the same, whether worn around the neck, wrist, or sewn onto clothes. Jewelry became a daily interface with the divine. It acted as medicine, shields, and whispered prayer. At its core, ancient jewelry turned into a survival tool, not so much physical as spiritual and social. It let people carry their gods with them, turning fear into something wearable, and face life's curveballs with beauty and a borrowed cosmic boost. As civilizations grew more stratified, jewelry evolved from sacred objects seen to visible status symbols, no longer just for protection or symbolism. It screamed, "I'm powerful, I'm rich, and you're not." From Mesopotamian queens to Chinese emperors, jewelry became political branding. Its sparkling shine reflected divine favor and elite identity. Is Sumer, one of civilization's first cradles. Archaeologists unearthed stunning examples of elite jewelry. In imperial China, jewelry turned into political symbolism. Its sparkling glow reflected divine favor and elite identity. In Sumer, one of civilization's earliest cradles, archaeologists uncovered stunning upper-class jewelry in Queen Puabi's royal tomb from around 2600 BCE. She was buried with layers of gold and lapis lazuli, a crown, necklace, large gold earrings, and an exquisitely beaded robe made of precious stones. Her death was a display of wealth, but also a spiritual statement. Her jewelry carried her power into the afterlife. Ancient Egyptians took this to the next level. Pharaohs wore elaborate, heavy broad collars. The ancient Egyptians took this to a whole new level. Pharaohs rocked huge, elaborate collars, heavy with gold, lapis lazuli, and enamel basically shouting divine royalty. Their crowns were decked out with snake motifs, symbolizing protection and sovereignty. Even the elite kids got decked out with amulets and rings. Jewelry wasn't just for show. It was daily diplomacy, a clear language of status. In ancient China, the upper crust wore jade, not gold. Jade wasn't just pretty. It stood for purity, immortality, and moral virtue. Confucian ideals even linked jade's physical traits to characters smooth yet strong, radiant but not flashy. Emperors were buried in jade funerary suits stitched with gold thread, believing it would protect their bodies and uplift their souls. Across the Mediterranean, the Mycenaeans, then Greeks and Romans, kept the trend alive. Golden laurel wreaths were worn at public ceremonies and funerals, showing off wealth and cultural finesse. Roman senators flaunted signet rings, each engraved with their family crest, a security key and status badge all in one. And let's not forget jewelry's role in court politics. A flashy necklace could be a favor gift or a trap, pulling someone into dangerous alliances. Jewelry was used to seal marriages, signal loyalty, and curry favor with gods and kings alike. In short, By the time writing showed up, jewelry wasn't just decoration or magic, it was infrastructure, carrying the weight of law, religion, dynasty, and class. A silent command language worn around the neck, wrapped across the chest, or flashing with a subtle flick of the hand. Behind every sparkling crown and carved ring was an ancient jeweler with dirt under their nails and fire in the forge. As societies got more complex, so did the craft. Jewelry wasn't just stringing beads or banging metal anymore. It became art, technology, and alchemy, often centuries ahead of its time. In Bronze Age civilizations, artisans mastered metalworking tools, techniques like granulation, fusing tiny gold balls onto surfaces, and intricate engraving demanded precise control of heat, materials, and geometry. For example, the Minoans on Crete crafted jewelry that looked almost modern: golden bees with tiny dangling honey drops, roaring lions, goddesses with outstretched wings. These weren't just accessories, they were miniature myths. Egyptian goldsmiths took things even further, using blowpipes to tame fire and open molds to cast. They created exquisite necklaces and amulets that still dazzle today. One of the coolest finds from Tutankhamun's tomb is a scarab chest ornament made with desert glass from Libya, a material formed by ancient meteor impacts. Jewelry here wasn't just decoration, it was cosmic. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, artisans were setting stones in gold, inventing crude drills powered by strings and bows, and perfecting intaglio carving on seal stones. These carvings weren't just pretty, they served as IDs, signatures, and sometimes amulets. Perhaps most notable was the lost wax casting technique, a breakthrough that allowed complex hollow metal shapes. This technique first popped up in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It involved shaping a wax model, covering it in clay, then heating it so the wax melted out, leaving a mold for molten metal. The result: rings, earrings, and pendants that were light yet intricate. By the Etruscan and Greek eras, jewelry had become a full-on industry. Specialized workshops hired engravers, metalsmiths, polishers, and gem cutters. Designs were duplicated with molds, and innovations like hinges, clasps, and even mechanical pendants appeared. These upgrades weren't just luxury fluff, including making a wax model, covering it with clay, then heating it until the wax melted away. Molten metal poured into molds. The result: rings, earrings, and pendants that were both light and intricate. By the time of the Etruscans and Greeks, jewelry had leveled up to a full-blown industry. Specialized workshops hired engravers, metalworkers, polishers, and gem cutters. Designs got copied with molds, and new tricks like hinges, clasps, and even mechanical pendants showed up. These upgrades weren't just about bling. They told stories of tech, trade, and talent. The rise of the jeweler meant human identity could now be crafted and flaunted. Jewelry became both an art and a secret code, a quiet shout-out to the hands that made it and the proud societies that wore it. As ancient trade routes stretched across deserts, seas, and empires, jewelry evolved beyond just personal flair or local rituals. It became currency, diplomacy, and a global commodity. A single gemstone could pass through dozens of hands, kingdoms, and languages before resting on a queen's neck or a warrior's sword hilt. Take lapis lazuli. For example, this deep blue stone was valued more than gold in the ancient world. Its only known source back then was mines in what's now Afghanistan. Yet lapis lazuli popped up in Mesopotamian temples, Egyptian tombs, and even in Mycenaean Greece. That means ancient traders hauled this rock thousands of miles, over mountain passes, down rivers, and through rough terrain. All for beauty, sure, but also for what that beauty meant: access, status, and connection. Trade turned jewelry from a local product into a cultural crossroads symbol. The Phoenicians, for example, played middleman, sailing from the Levant to North Africa and southern Europe, distributing both their own fancy glass beads and foreign goods. Following their trail, Egyptian lotus motifs show up in Iberia, while Assyrian designs sneak into Mediterranean workshops. The Silk Road carried pearls from the Persian Gulf, rubies from India, and jade from China, sometimes all the way to Rome. These weren't just materials, they were messages. A Chinese jade hairpin in a Central Asian tomb hints at a political alliance. A Persian turquoise ring in a Greek market tells tales of empire clashes and cultural mashups. Jewelry was also used as tribute and bribes. Emperors traded it to seal treaties. Rulers paid with it to calm invading armies. Gold bracelets, gem-encrusted belts, and pearl crowns acted like political chess pieces, even among regular folks. Jewelry had real economic weight. In many ancient societies, jewelry was portable wealth, especially for women. A bride's dowry might include bracelets or rings, both decoration and emergency savings. If push came to shove, she could sell a necklace to survive famine, fund a trip, or pay debts. Basically, ancient jewelry was the world's first global brand, recognizable across borders, tailored to local tastes, but still carrying the same timeless message. That's priceless, and I'm hooked on the forces that made it happen. From caravans to trading caravans, it's traveled with us: decoration, passport, promise, while jewelry often signaled status and sacredness. It ultimately took on one of its longest-lasting roles, a symbol of love, commitment, and memory. Long before diamond engagement rings were a thing, people used beads, rings, and bracelets to mark relationships, both romantic and sacred. In ancient Egypt, rings weren't just pretty gifts, but contracts. With their endless circles, rings symbolized eternity. Couples exchanged rings woven from intertwined strands. Engagement rings, made of ivory or gold, were usually worn on the left ring finger. That tradition was based on the belief that this finger had a vein running straight to the heart. Later called the vein of love, in ancient Rome, engagement rings, called annulus, were made of iron, symbolizing strength and eternity. Some rings were engraved with portraits of the couple or clasped hands, a design called fed, which survived through medieval Europe and beyond. These rings weren't just love tokens, they had legal weight, often tied to dowries, inheritance, and children's legitimacy. Other cultures marked romantic bonds with matching bracelets, necklaces, or amulets. In some tribal societies, lovers exchanged talismans made from bone, teeth, or carved wood, believed to bind them spiritually no matter how far apart they traveled. Jewelry also played a key role in wedding rituals. In India, tradition holds strong bridal makeup with exquisite gold jewelry, including nose rings, anklets, bracelets, and hairpins, serving both aesthetic and spiritual purposes. Each piece carries symbolic meaning: prosperity, protection, fertility. The Mongol Sutra, a black beaded necklace worn by the groom at weddings, became the symbol of marital status, kind of like the Western wedding ring. Across cultures, love jewelry hides secret messages. In Renaissance Europe, flower rings were engraved with romantic poems or secret sayings. Some were inscribed inside the band, only visible to the couple. Others were hidden in compartments, holding mini portraits, locks of hair, or perfume. In this way, jewelry became a tiny vault of emotions, a compact relic of memories, intentions, and bonds. It's the tangible form of something invisible: faith, devotion, connection, worn close to the skin, kissed in moments of longing, passed down from generation to generation, whispering, "You are not forgotten. We are still linked." Long before vows were written down, they were etched into metal and worn with pride. In ancient history, jewelry wasn't just body decoration, it connected people to the divine. Jewelry often had spiritual meaning, used not just for beauty or wealth, but to ask for blessings, ward off evil, and mark sacred roles. A necklace was rarely just a necklace, it was a prayer, a barrier, a silent chat with the gods. In ancient Mesopotamia, priests and priestesses wore intricately designed bras and headdresses during rituals. They weren't accessories, they were spiritual costumes crafted to reflect celestial shapes or mythical creatures. A bead could represent a planet, a clasp could symbolize a god's weapon. Jewelry served as a physical expression of cosmic order. Egypt took it even further. High priests wore items designed to channel the power of the gods. For example, the Manat necklace wasn't just for show, it was believed to bring fertility and divine grace, worn by Hathor's priestesses. It was often shaken like a rattle during rituals to please the goddess. The famous Usk necklace, seen in countless Egyptian paintings, symbolized the sun. Its curve mimicked the sun god Ra's path across the sky. Across ancient India, jewelry played a key role in both Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Earrings, bangles, and anklets were thought to stimulate energy points on the body, balance chakras, and promote spiritual health. Gold was linked to purity and immortality, often reserved for gods and sacred power. Statues of gods were adorned with intricate gold jewelry, reflecting the belief that the divine deserved and demanded earthly riches. In the Americas, The Maya and Aztecs valued jade far above gold. It symbolized life force, breath, and divine energy. Priests wore jade pendants shaped like gods, and rulers were buried with jade in their mouths to carry their souls to the afterlife. Even in early Christianity, amulets and medals engraved with crosses or saints were worn to ward off plagues, demons, or temptation. Jewelry here wasn't just religious, it was protective. Whether worn by humble farmers or high priests, ancient spiritual jewelry still reflects a shared human desire for shelter, favor, and meaning from beyond. A shimmering sacred light, a holy thread, a way to carry the sky not above you, but around your neck. When ancient civilizations rose and fell, their jewelry remained, buried in tombs, hidden in ruins, or handed down through generations. What started as beads on a string evolved into something way stronger, a container of memory, a statement of identity, sometimes the only clue left behind in burial sites from Scandinavia to Nubia. Jewelry offers intimate portraits of the dead. A brooch can reveal cultural origins. A ring can hint at marital status. Necklaces made from all sorts of materials might hint at long-distance trade or migration. Even how people wore jewelry layered up on the chest, tangled in their hair, or hidden under clothes tells us how they saw themselves and how they wanted to be remembered and remember. These pieces were made to outlast their wearers. They were heirlooms, symbols of continuity through changing times. A mother's pendant might be worn by her daughter at her wedding. Today, a warrior's ring might be buried with his son. Jewelry becomes a bridge between past and present, often more durable than stories, more personal than monuments. In exile or crisis, jewelry is also a way to hold on to identity. When cities collapse or people are forced to move, they take only what they can carry, and jewelry is both portable wealth and emotional support. A simple bracelet can mean more than a house left behind. The materials themselves age gracefully. Gold doesn't rust. Gems don't rot. So, unlike clothes or offerings, jewelry can last for millennia, and because of that, it holds human fingerprints, both literal and metaphorical. You can almost feel the pride, love, rituals, and pain in every scratch, clasp, and missing stone. Even today, we repeat these ancient instincts. We inherit wedding rings. We wear initial necklaces. We keep pendants close to our hearts. We store jewelry in boxes, not for market value, but for the people they remind us of. So when we look back at ancient jewelry, we're not just learning about fashion or metallurgy. We're diving into human longing, the desire to be seen, protected, belong, and ultimately remembered, wrapped in gold, strung in shells, cast in bronze. Jewelry's story is our story, durable, personal, eternal. Beneath peaceful wheat fields and quiet roads of northern France lies something unexpected, a massive underground city carved straight into soft chalk bedrock, just outside the village of Naours, near the Somme River, is one of Europe's weirdest archaeological mysteries, a vast underground maze with over 300 rooms, stretching more than 3 kilometers. Go down just 33 meters, and you're no longer in rural Picardy. You're inside a ghost city carved from stone, easy to miss. On the surface, just a tiny entrance on a shady slope, but step inside, and the cool air greets you like a secret. The tunnels spread out, they twist and turn, they open into secret rooms, stables, kitchens, even a chapel. Some rooms connect to long, low-ceiling corridors. Other tunnels are isolated dead ends, maybe for storage or more secretive purposes. It feels like someone turned hell into a village, not a cave. The most unsettling thing isn't just the scale, but the silence about its origin. No exact records tell us why or when the Nahur's complex was first built. Estimates say construction started around the Middle Ages, maybe between the 9th and 13th centuries. But was it a refuge, a monk's hideout, or something else entirely? The walls don't spill the beans. A popular guess is monks or local villagers began digging tunnels as a way to escape Viking raids or later invasions during the 100 Years' War. That's totally plausible. Chalk is soft and easy to dig, and the clever ventilation means you could light fires without choking everyone inside. It's almost invisible from above, making it the perfect hideout over time. The city beneath Nahur's grew. Wells were dug, chimneys hidden inside tree trunks poked above ground. Horses were even stabled deep underground, out of enemy sight. Yet despite this engineering genius, the site vanished from collective memory until rediscovered by a priest come amateur archaeologist in the 19th century. And that was just the beginning, because what started as a possible medieval refuge later became a sanctuary, a weird little oddity, and a tarp for soldiers in one of history's bloodiest battles. But here, surrounded by carved walls and a mysterious purpose, one thing's clear. Nurse wasn't built out of fear. It was built to last. Walking through Nars is like stepping into the blueprint of an invisible civilization. The walls, cool and chalky to the touch, tell tales of centuries of carving, all done by hand, one pickaxe swing at a time. No machinery marks, no signs of a rushed job. Instead, what you find is precision, purpose, and layers of human labor. Generations shaped their own underground hideout. The soft local chalk, called cray, made digging relatively easy, at least compared to harder rock. But the real challenge wasn't digging, it was engineering. How do you build an underground settlement without it collapsing on your head? How do you ventilate a multi-level maze without anyone noticing? The Now folks figured it out. Rooms laid out with weird logic, living spaces, small enough to be warmed by body heat or fire, storage rooms where food could stay cold for months, and community halls hinting at an organized society, even planned underground, entire areas dedicated to animals, especially horses, showing whoever lived down there wasn't planning a quick weekend getaway, but weeks or longer. The most impressive, the ventilation shafts. Dozens of vents slither up from deep underground to the surface, hiding among tree branches and leaves above, some cleverly camouflaged with foliage or debris to avoid detection. The airflow they provided let people cook, breathe, and survive in secret. Smoke from fires disappeared without a trace, vanishing into the forest canopy. Evidence suggests this place took centuries to build, slowly expanding room by room as needed. No signs of forced labor or fast construction. It seems like a community effort, maintained and improved over generations. Not a military fortress, not a castle built by royal decree. It's a place born from necessity, cooperation, and quiet innovation. The craftsmanship isn't flashy, but it works. Entrances rounded, ceilings reinforced, walls smooth, not crumbling, even without decoration. There's a beauty in geometry, repetition, and the stubborn will to make this place real. Maybe that's why Nior still stands. It's not just carved from chalk. It's carved from the deep human instinct to protect, preserve, and prepare for the worst. Although no exact records survive about Naos's original builders, rumors from history suggest the first inhabitants might have been monks in medieval northern France. Invasions weren't a surprise. First Vikings, then later conflicts like the 100 Years' War. Monastery communities often stood on the front lines of chaos, and many chose to carve sanctuaries beneath their chapels. Naos, with its isolated location and vast underground space, fits that pattern almost perfectly. Clues supporting this theory lie in the layout itself. Among hundreds of rooms, there's a central chapel carved with a simple altar and vaulted ceiling, plain, sure, but heavy with spiritual weight. The room's clearly designed for group worship, space for small gatherings, and even faint carvings along the walls, maybe faded poems or symbols now lost to time. This isn't a storage room or defensive bunker. It's a sanctuary, literally. The monks might have started the carving, but they weren't the only ones seeking refuge here. Over centuries of war spreading through the region, local villages and farmers turned to Naor for shelter. It's believed entire families hid down there during sieges or enemy raids, especially when mercenary groups or foreign armies marched through Picardy. Local legend says the underground city could hold up to 3,000 people at once. This was more than a hideout. It was a bustling underground community running on, complete silence, right under the enemy's feet. Imagine dark hallways filled with hushed whispers, the smell of smoke, the faint clinking of pots and pans. Now and then a child's cry, all happening underground while danger lurks above. But despite the fear that might have pushed people into the earth, Nora was more than just a safe spot. It gave them dignity. People weren't crammed in like animals. They had rooms, hallways, space to breathe, pray, and wait. There were rules, organization, maybe even a hierarchy. Who got which room, who guarded the tunnels, who handed out the food? The answers are lost, but the design hints at a social structure, not chaos, in many ways. Now, wasn't just a hideout. It was a quiet, hidden, self-sufficient society, built not for luxury, but for survival. And by doing that, It kept communities alive that no one above ground even knew existed for centuries. The underground city of Na quietly did its job, sheltering monks, villages, and maybe even generations from war and looting. Then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, it slipped from memory by the 18th century. Hardly anyone nearby even knew it existed. The entrance got swallowed by overgrown plants. Stories slowly faded away. The city below wasn't buried by earth, but by time. How does a city vanish slowly, bit by bit, when peace returned to northern France? The need for underground shelter faded. Folks went back to farms and fields. Families planted deeper roots above ground. Oral histories thinned out generation by generation, and eventually, no one told their kids that beneath their feet was a whole chalk civilization. No records of it being used in the Napoleonic Wars, not a peep during the French Revolution. The 19th century passed with almost no one mentioning the tunnels. It became a local legend, a kid's story, a creepy warning about secret rooms and ghostly monks, until one day in the 1880s, curiosity brought it back to light. A Catholic priest named Ernest Danicourt had an amateur archaeology hobby. He'd heard whispers. A shepherd boy talked about a hollow sound beneath his feet. Locals thought he was nuts, but Danicourt kept at it. He began clearing rubble and brush around a strange dip in the ground. And what he found shocked even skeptics. In the dark, armed only with lantern and rope, he uncovered hundreds of rooms, each fancier than the last. Probably the first person in 150 years to set foot in those halls. He cleared, mapped, and started cataloging the site over time. He opened it to the public as a curiosity. Visitors came to tour the underground city, wondering how something so massive could hide right under their noses. Still, even Danicourt never fully grasped its origin. The medieval dates were just guesses. The purpose of some rooms remains a mystery. Why were some passages sealed off? Who dug the deeper, narrower tunnels? The more they uncovered, the more questions chalk walls raised. Ours were back, but only as a puzzle, an empty stage hauntingly waiting for actors long gone. A city remembered not by documents, but by silence, darkness, and rooms patiently waiting for someone to return. Just a few decades after Father Danicourt rediscovered Naur, the peaceful fields of Picardy were torn apart by a new kind of horror. World War I trench warfare turned northern France into a bloody maze of mud, barbed wire, and shell craters, and while the fighting raged above, something extraordinary happened below. Nam became a secret refuge once again. French, British, Australian, and even Canadian soldiers passed through this area as part of the Somme offensive, one of the bloodiest campaigns of the entire war. Many found themselves near barbed wire and artillery pits, and while hell raged above ground, something extraordinary was happening below. Niort once again became a secret hideout. French, British, Australian, and even Canadian soldiers passed through here as part of the Somme offensive, one of the bloodiest campaigns of the whole war. Many found themselves near the village of Naur. some heading underground, maybe to hide, maybe out of curiosity, maybe just chasing a brief, quiet moment away from the thunder above. But they didn't just visit, they left their mark. On the soft chalk walls of Naur, over 2,000 inscriptions were carefully carved by soldiers, listing names, ranks, regiments, dates, even hometowns. It became an underground autograph book, a human time capsule etched in stone. Some signatures were fancy, complete with military badges. Others were heartbreakingly simple. Tom, 1916, J. Carter, 14th Battalion, not vandalism. This was memory etched by men who knew they might never make it home. Most of these soldiers were Aussie troops from the Royal Australian Force. Their graffiti is among the most abundant. Historians think these soldiers came to Na for a short break or to scout the area. This place probably reminded them of home, of cave systems like Jenelin Caves back in New South Wales, or maybe it was just pure magic, stepping out of trench hell into an ancient stone city. Some carvings are dated just days before the Soma battle kicked off in July 1916. Many of those names never made it back to Australia, England, or Canada, but their writing remains. Their presence still lingers in these shadowy corridors, not ghosts, but echoes in recent years. Researchers have used these inscriptions to trace family histories and even connect descendants with soldiers who died in the war. What was once a forgotten hideout is now a living memorial, not through statues or parades, but through handwriting carved in stone by men staring into the abyss. Down here, in the silence, their words whisper, "I was here. I mattered. Don't forget me." What makes Na haunting isn't just its size or mystery. It's the graffiti, thousands of chalk inscriptions, not by medieval monks or refugees, but by World War I soldiers, young guys stuck in a war that erased normal life. These aren't random scribbles or meaningless doodles. They acted carefully, thoughtfully, and very humanely. A name carved in stone becomes a voice refusing to fade away. So far, over $2,000 such inscriptions have been cataloged, most, including name, rank, battalion number, and date. Some are very precise. Pinch Kelly, 3rd Battalion, AIF, March 1916. Others are more cryptic, just initials. A year, maybe a single word like home or peace. The chalk walls became a canvas for memory, every letter carved with the same discipline they used on their rifles. Lots of soldiers carved their names in clusters. Groups of men from the same battalion often stood side by side. One tunnel stretch, Aussie soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions carved the entire wall, turning it into an unofficial regimental memorial. It wasn't about ego. It was about being remembered in the chaos of war. Leaving a mark meant everything, a silent act of defiance against the oblivion of death. Some went even further. They carved their hometowns Sydney, Perth, Manchester. They etched crosses, kangaroos, or military insignia into the walls. Some even left short messages. "Goodbye, France," one soldier wrote, another carving. was simple but vivid. Then there are the dates, many in 1916, just weeks or days before the Battle of the Somme, where tens of thousands died in mere hours. The eerie closeness of these peaceful carvings to the slaughter above makes time feel like a suspended breath, a calm before the storm. Today, these inscriptions are a hot topic for military historians and genealogists alike. Names once forgotten in history are being reconnected with families. Some descendants now walk these same tunnels, tracing familiar letters with their fingers, knowing their granddad or uncle stood here, laughed here, maybe even cried here before heading back to the noise of war. Na is no longer just traced with fingers over familiar letters. Knowing their grandpa or uncle had stood here, laughed here, maybe cried here before returning to the chaos of war. Nior wasn't just another archaeological site. It was a living text, carved not on paper, but on stone, a place where voices from the past still echoed, refusing to be forgotten. After the Great War, Nior fell silent again. Soldiers left, many forever, and the underground city returned to its quiet, chalky gloom. The names they carved faded beneath dust, soot, and moisture. Once bustling tunnels became curious tourist spots, occasionally visited, but mostly forgotten by history. Looks like peace has its own way of burying things. For decades, this underground complex was mostly ignored. The museum opened to the public between the two world wars, and again after World War II. Travel brochures from the 50s and 60s pitched Naur as some weird medieval hotspot, La Cité Souterraine, but hardly anyone got what they were really walking through. Most tourists just wandered the dark hallways, clueless that they were passing by thousands of soldiers' names quietly engraved on the walls behind them. Even worse, the place started falling apart from neglect and random damage. The lighting system scorched the fragile chalk. Graffiti and modern signs were slapped on, sometimes right next to centuries-old inscriptions. Dust, mold, and vibrations from visitors slowly chipped away at parts of the structure. Meanwhile, the real historical meaning buried inside got lost under souvenir shop explanations and shallow storytelling. The inscriptions remained there, right under people's noses. But no one really noticed. It wasn't until 2014, nearly a century after World War I, that Naur finally got its voice back. A team led by Gilles Priot, a French archaeologist, stumbled upon the full extent of the soldiers' graffiti during a routine survey. What they found wasn't just a handful of random names. It was a massive war archive, carved by hand. They realized Naur wasn't just a medieval hideout or tourist stop. It was a time capsule, a spiritual snapshot of the war. This discovery reignited interest in Naur. Preservation efforts kicked off. Digital scans were made, and the graffiti cataloged for historical study. Families from far-off places like Australia and Canada came to see the signatures of ancestors who never came home. Still, the silence of those lost decades lingered for almost 100 years. Naur's deepest messages were hidden not because of secrets, but because of neglect And maybe the biggest tragedy wasn't that soldiers carved their names into stone, but that we forgot to look for them. The rediscovery of Naur's wartime graffiti in 2014 changed everything. What was once marketed as a strange underground tourist trap suddenly got recognized for what it really was: a sacred record of interrupted lives, etched in stone by men ready to die. Overnight, the place transformed from a tourist stop into an internationally significant historical site. Leading this rediscovery was archaeologist Jill Prio. Her initial work was just a simple conservation study, but as she and her team delved deeper into the tunnels, they realized they weren't just cataloging medieval architecture. They were standing in a World War I archive not written on paper, but carved into the walls themselves. The team found over 2,000 names, many from the Australian Imperial Force, meticulously etched in chalk from 1916 to 1917. Prio described it as the largest collections of underground World War I inscriptions ever discovered. Not just a few passing soldiers. It was a steady stream of men sheltering from the war above, leaving their final thoughts in stone. This discovery sparked an international response. Researchers began matching names with military records, identifying individuals, units, and fates. Families in Australia, the UK, and Canada were contacted. Some found out for the first time that their grandpas or uncles had passed through Naur. Others discovered that the names on medals and telegrams were chalked into walls halfway across the world by steady streams of visitors seeking refuge from the war above and leaving their last thoughts in stone. This discovery sparked international attention. Researchers started cross-referencing names with military records, identifying individuals, units, and fates. Families in Australia, the UK says, and Canada were contacted. Some found out for the first time that their grandpas or uncles had passed through Naur. Others realized the names on medals and telegrams were the same ones chalked half a world away. Meanwhile, efforts to restore and preserve the site accelerated. Parts of the underground city were scanned in 3D. Lighting systems improved to protect the chalk walls, and explanatory displays were updated to reflect the site's newfound importance. Some sections of graffiti were sealed off, so visitors couldn't get in, preventing further erosion. What emerged wasn't just a story of archaeology, but also a story of reconnecting. People know it's not just to admire stone walls, but to touch history, trace the names carved on fingertips, and feel, even if just for a moment, the heartbeat of a long-gone soldier. It's more than honoring the dead. It's about listening to what they left behind. Thanks to these efforts, Naur is no longer just a forgotten name. It's what it always was, a message in the dark, patiently waiting for the world to remember. Today, the underground city of Na isn't just a medieval engineering marvel or a war memory relic. It's a symbol of resilience, human creativity, and the strange closeness between survival and silence. It's not a monument to a single moment, but a layered copy of human history, every corridor echoing the fears, hopes, and choices of different eras. What started as a monastery hideout grew into a full underground refuge, then became a forgotten curiosity, and finally, a war memorial accidentally carved by the witnesses themselves. In this way, it defies classification. It's not just history, it's a psychological space holding prayers, fears, routines, and rest across centuries. The cold chalk walls have absorbed the breaths of monks, villagers, and soldiers. Each left something behind. In modern times, Nior has become a place for reflection, especially for descendants of the World War I soldiers who carved their names there. Visiting the tunnels today isn't like stepping into a battlefield or museum. It's like stepping into a shared memory, a memory once buried and now resurging. You don't just walk past stone, you walk past testimony. This place has also become a spot for international collaboration. French and Australian historians are now teaming up to match the inscriptions with military records. School kids get tours through the tunnels to learn history as visually as possible by seeing what others carved with their own hands during times when they weren't sure they'd survive the week. Maybe the strongest lesson Nior teaches us is about legacy. It wasn't built for glory, but out of sheer necessity. Yet it endures, and over time, its quiet persistence became its power. It reminds us that history isn't just told in speeches and statues. It's whispered into chalk, hidden in dark corners, patiently waiting for someone to remember. It doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, but it endures, and in doing so, it speaks history told not in speeches or statues. It whispered in chalk, hidden in dark corners, patiently waiting for someone to remember. It doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, but it endures, and in doing so, it speaks of humanity's stubborn instinct to carve meaning into the places we fear the most, leaving a simple mark that says we were here, we mattered.